I'd like to introduce you on this show today to an extraordinary leader. She's not only experienced in airport operations, she happens to be a member of the Pathways to Aviation Board of Trustees. And so, Marilee, welcome to Pathways to Aviation Career Conversations Workshop. And just want you to come in and share with us, your career journey, what you're doing now in the industry, whether through your employment, through industry involvement on different councils and organizations. And if there's any advice you want to share, go ahead and share it. But right now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn the show completely over to you, and however you want to run it, you can run it. But welcome to the workshop.
Pete, thank you so much, because I'm such a believer in Pathways to Aviation, because we're growing the next generation of aviation leaders. And I think that's so important. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what I'm doing now and what I've done over the last 30 years, really, in airports. So I'm here in New York. I've been working for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey for 4 months now. I'm actually the Chief Aviation Strategy Officer. I work at 4 World Trade Center, which is a block and a half from where I'm living. And I'm sorry you can't see out my window, because I actually have a view of the Statue of Liberty. So pretty cool to be here in New York, and kind of it's a bucket list item for me. So in my current role, I really oversee the aviation policy for the 5 airports run by the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. And of course, you've got really busy ones like JFK, Newark, and LaGuardia. So a lot of things going on. My group, strategy group, also is responsible for all the forecasting and passenger statistics that go on for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. So a year ago, I retired from being the CEO of the Reno Tahoe Airport Authority. I had also been the Chief Operating Officer for Reno Tahoe Airport Authority. I was the Assistant Director of Aviation for Oakland International Airport, and I began my career at Mineta San Jose International Airport, where I spent 11 years. So I've totally been in West Coast Airport. So this is a new journey for me, certainly working for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. And I've got to tell you that when you were talking about LinkedIn, that's how I got this opportunity. In January of 2020, when my organization announced that I was retiring and there was going to be a recruitment effort for my replacement, actually I had a headhunter reach out to me on LinkedIn. And that was kind of a new experience for me. So some of the things I think I really appreciated what Pete had to be said about being intentional, because I think when you're starting this career journey, and your career journey is going to go for many years, you really have to, at the heart of things, know what it is you want. But I think along your journey, you also have to be open to new opportunities that you may have never thought about. I would never have thought to go try to pursue something with the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. But when this opportunity came my way, I went, why not? Why not? I had many interviews. I probably interviewed with about a dozen people well over a year. And of course, those were all virtual during this pandemic. But I think it starts when you start your career, and along your career, it's really important to have a personal mission statement. And I don't think that's as big a thing anymore, that people are doing personal mission statements, but it's really about taking stock about what you want to be doing. Again, in the words that Pete said, be intentional. What is it you would like to do? And that may change over years, over time, after you try one thing. And I think you've got to be, during your career, know that sometimes some things are going to work and sometimes they're not. And you have to go on. When something doesn't work, go to the next thing. But I think follow your passion. And your passion, I hope, because you're on this call and you're part of this workshop, that passion is about aviation. But I think, Pete talked a lot about networking. I think I have gotten this opportunity here in New York because I was active in the trade associations, the airport trade associations, Airports Council International North America, and the American Association of Airport executive. So I was a known quantity when my name came up for an opportunity. So, but it's that networking that I did over time, being active in the trade associations. And you have so much opportunity as students, knowing that there are student chapters of professional organizations. So jump in and get involved in a student, because I think when you're a student, people are much more, they want to talk about what they do because they love what they do. And so I think the other path to getting jobs is through internships and fellowships. The Port Authority of New York and New Jersey is very active with student internships and fellowships. So go to the website for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, and you will find that there is opportunities for fellowships and internships. And fellowships are like a 2-year program where you rotate around to different departments within the Port Authority and really get experience. And then as jobs come open, you have the opportunity, hopefully, to land a job. I have met so many people in the department that I work in, came through the door having been a fellow for the Port Authority. So great opportunity. So, you know, even with kind of the pandemic, I think there may have been a hiatus with some organizations for a year, but I think they're getting back on track with those internships. So really be active. And I know, Pete, you have really a whole list of organizations that do have internships. So that's a really great way to get your foot in the door, is getting to know an organization, and they get to know you and check you out. And that's a great way to get a job with an organization. I think as you progress in your career, there are many times an opportunity comes up. It may not be more pay. It may not be a new job title. It may be something that's a cultural thing for the organization. I know at Reno Tahoe Airport Authority, we had culture clubs to really build morale within the organization. It was a great way for people to get visibility in the organization and that leadership opportunity that may not have come right within their own departments, but stand out, volunteer, step out, be part of task force and special committees, so that you get that experience and that people get to know you. I know that I really got the opportunity to move more when I was at Mineta San Jose International Airport, because I was given an interim assignment over the planning and engineering staff. And that really led me in a different direction in my career, that I went on to be a chief operating officer at Reno Tahoe International Airport. But it's saying yes as those opportunities, or when there's a gap between a permanent and a person maybe coming into a job, raise your hand and say, I'm glad to take on that assignment in an interim role. So I've had many interim roles during my career, and that's led me in a different direction. It's been giving me the opportunity to show what I could do, and really given me kind of more experience. So I want to open it up into any questions. I'm happy to go on. I think some of the things that have been really important is you have to have a hard work ethic, and along with networking, but you have to be willing to put in the time to learn about your organization. And I can say, even I've been around for so long in the industry, but this is the toughest thing that I've ever done, working for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, because I think I mentioned I've worked for 3 different West Coast airports. I learned one airport. Here, I am learning Newark, I'm learning JFK, I'm learning LaGuardia. Not only are the operational aspects complex, but they're all in different stages of redevelopment. My head is just spinning. I just want that ship that goes into my head. There's also New York Stewart Airport in the Hudson Valley, where we're trying to build more air service, and Teterboro, which is a very, very active general aviation airport. So it is, I think you have to plan on during your career is that you never stop learning. You always have to be a continuous learner in whatever you're doing, and look for opportunities to grow, whether it's going at some point going back to school, taking whatever courses and enrichment opportunities come out of the trade associations. You have to continuously learn. You have to continuously learn from people in the industry and people that you work with. So that I want to just stop and find out if there's any questions that anybody has. If not, then I'll go on and talk about some other things. But any questions out there?
As you said, you're currently working as a aviation policymaker for Port Authority, right? Like, what exactly is the policy making, and what do you do in the policy making?
Well, let me tell you, because this is all new to me. So when you look at JFK and LaGuardia airports and Newark, they're congested airport. So they all fall under slot policies from the Federal Aviation, from the FAA. So there's a lot of policy around slot considerations. A lot of policy of looking at what the FAA is doing and how that might impact the airports, looking at the trends with the airlines. So those are some of the big things that we're looking at. So just, you know, what at the time, the Biden administration, what are some of the new things that we're seeing coming out of the FAA, the Department of Transportation? So tracking, you know, right now we're tracking the infrastructure bill, and particularly what does that mean for aviation? Well, there's $25 billion for aviation in there. So trying to really influence for the better of my organization, for example, the formula that will be used in the infrastructure bill for the distribution of aviation funds. So those are the kinds of things. So it's a little bit of everything, but these airports are very different because they're slot constrained. The other thing that we're doing quite a bit of, I would say, is that we call it governance, and it's not like governance meaning working with your local governments. Part of the way, one of the things for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey is they do not, generally they don't operate their terminals. You have, for example, a JFK airport, there's third-party terminal operators. So a number of years ago during a snowstorm, you know, there was a horrible customer experience. And it used to be that the Port Authority didn't feel like it owned its own customers because the customers, there wasn't as much influence over each terminal operator. Well, at that time and place, they decided to turn that around and say, incorporate customer service standards across all of the airports. So that means that there may be some changed language in leases for those terminal operators, how they work with customers during their regular operations or normal operations. So we're doing a lot to build in you know, a customer standards, for example, in concession leases and airline leases and terminal operator leases. So that's a big part of what we're doing. But one of the things is just the Port Authority has taken a big interest in saying we own the customer experience across the airports, even though we may, it's like what airport operators everywhere say, when somebody comes into the airport, they're not going to make the distinction that, you know, the airport is over here and the airport does this, runs the facility, and TSA runs, you know, the checkpoint. When a customer has a bad experience, they're going to blame everybody, but they're most likely going to, you know, the governmental entity that runs that airport is going to take that blame. So I think where we've seen in recent years is airports, whether they be run by a city, a county, or be their own entity like the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey or Reno Tahoe Airport Authority, they're going to own that customer experience and try to influence it.
I just
I
have
hope
a
I
small
answered your question.
Yeah, that answered. And you said the airports are already slot constrained, right? Do you have the control of slot constraints, or FAA controls the slots?
The FAA controls the slots, which is an operating time, you know, during peak times. So that's actually under FAA control. So there's, you know, there's a rhythm, there's a period, you know, a summer slot period, and then there's a winter. So, you know, the airlines have to submit, and there's, because these are constrained airports, there's a lid, a capacity constraint on the number of slot, you know, number of operations that can be handled, you know, at Newark, JFK, and LaGuardia. So it's a very different, you know, I've worked at most recently at Reno Tahoe International Airport, which has a lot of room for capacity for operations. So this is a very, very different experience to work in New York and New Jersey.
I guess it is because of the reason they are the East Coast gateways for US. There are a lot of international carriers coming in, so
Yeah, it's
that
a
might be the
very,
reason.
as you can well imagine, it's a very difficult time for JFK because of, the constraints now on international travel. But one of the ways that the Port Authority has really tried to bring about change is that we are a member of the U.S. Travel Association, which promotes international travel to the U.S. And so, they are a lobbying organization along with our airport trade groups. We work with the U.S. Travel Association to really try to influence, opening up the borders.
Thanks for the answers.
Thank you for the great questions.
Marilee, you didn't start right out of school working for an airport, or did you?
No, I didn't. Okay, my passion was, thank you for that question, because
What was your
I've got a lot more years of experience I didn't account for. So actually, when I got out of college, I wanted to travel. So I was actually a travel writer for a trade publication in the day that they used to have travel agents. I was an editor and writer for a trade publication out of San Francisco. And it was a wonderful opportunity because I had a goal to see, a good part of the world before I was 30. Well, I accomplished that probably by 25 because of having the opportunity to travel and write about travel. But it kind of led me, I was a writer for a business publication after that, but then I found myself in San Jose, and I frankly didn't know who operated airports, just knew, hey, it fits right in with my travel passion. So I am so in admiration of many of you, of the students probably on this call that are going to school for careers in aviation. That's not the way I started. I mean, I just had to follow my love of travel and know that I love being in airports and operating airports. I became a number of years ago accredited airport executive, which really means that I know that body of knowledge to run an airport. I think it's very important to learn and be accredited in whatever form of aviation that you're in. But again, my passion led me to where my career took me. And but I had some fun years doing a lot of travel. Thank you for that question.
So you bring up a good point. So you weren't specifically schooled in airport management. So how did you go about finding and getting the training, and where did you get it at?
Well, my undergraduate degree was in international relations, and I have an MBA. So really my path into airports came in being a public information officer. Working with the news media, developing marketing materials. So I took what I had, knew from working and writing and editing and translated that into work in an airport, and kind of came up through being a public information officer, being the media representative for Mineta San Jose International, getting into air service development because again, I always loved the touch points during my career when I got to use my degree in international relations or some semblance of it, when I got to work on route development and really, learned a lot. There's always courses through the industry. Very early on, I became a certified member through the American Association of Airport Executives. And then I became an accredited member. But that really early on, I wanted to be a certified member to say, I know this body of knowledge on running an airport. So I think it's taking advantage of all the different classes and educational opportunities that were available through the industry, but learning on the job and getting out there. And once you get a job, is really being open, following people. For me to learn more about the operational side of the airport, it was getting up in the morning and going out with the duty managers who are doing runway checks early in the morning so that I could really understand, the operational aspects, all the markings on the pavement. So I think you learn from the people that you work with, learning the financial side of the airport by sitting down, learning the planning side, and really an accreditation process put me through that. But I'm so in admiration because I think many of the students that Pete is working with know that they want to follow aviation, and they're in a course, they're in a study program for those kind of careers. I fell into this, and so I've had to work at it kind of on the job training and learn it while I went along. So it didn't start with that intention. So thank you for that. But I think, many of us learn as we work what it is we truly want to do.
Thank you.
Marilee, that kind of leads to my question. You had mentioned that early on you had a personal mission statement, and I'm going to actually ask Pete to weigh in on this. So we talk about what's your why, the Simon Sinek theme. What is the difference between a personal mission statement and your why? Or is it the same?
I think the language has just changed. I mean, I think,
Okay.
I think it's the same thing. And when I couldn't even find, I probably don't even have that piece of paper where I wrote that. So it's the why, but it's what you are saying about yourself. Why, why, or writing down kind of where you want to go. So I think the terminology is different now. And I probably did it, 20, I don't know, a long time ago. But it's guided me.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
And so I think, Pete, some of your discussion about, know your why, I think it's important, because I think there are times you have to test what you're doing and say, is this really following where I want to go? And I love what Pete had to say tonight about, if you want to be a mechanic, if you want to be, be intentional and go out and meet those people. So thank you. Are there any other questions? You've got the best questions.
Since you said you are the ex-CEO, I guess, Chief Executive
Yes, I was
Officer.
the CEO of the Reno Tahoe Airport Authority, Reno Tahoe International Airport, and Reno State Airport for 7 years. And prior to that, I was also the Chief Operating Officer for 12 and a half years.
Do you find any takeaways from the previous work experience into this current role?
Yes, no. I've got to say, I mean, there's many learnings, but this is such a totally different, I mean, it's such a huge, I mean, I'm in an organization with 8,000 employees. I actually report to the head of aviation for all the airports, and he's also the chief operating officer for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, which is, bridges and tolls and maritime and all kinds of things. So, there are always things about how to manage a team, about how to lead a team, but I'm starting over in many ways as well, working for a very different organization. So I think what I want to say is that you never stop learning. Each new experience, I mean, you're building. I mean, the good thing about this is I feel I'm building on what many of the things I've done before, but there's so many new things, is I have to be open to change and learning, to be in a totally new environment and something that I've not done before.
Marilee, this may catch you off guard, but what advice would you give a young person right now? Or would you advise for them to pursue aviation? Maybe that's a better question.
Oh, absolutely.
And why would you advise them? Why would you tell them aviation is the place to be?
Well, I don't think a lot of times people don't realize how many different aspects of aviation. And I think that by bringing in different speakers, there's so many different aspects to aviation. And, I've been on the airport side, but whether you're in finance, accounting, if you're a mechanic, if, just anything, because an airport's like a small city. So from an airport perspective, all those different types of jobs happen at airports. And I think people don't ever think about that, and you attract people in airports that just have a passion for aviation, but they may be a chief financial officer, they may be an accountant, they may be an engineer, and they're working in that environment. But I don't think people know the scope really of what is available in aviation. And I guess if anything that we've learned during the pandemic, I think it's brought the world closer in terms of the learning opportunities, because I think before we always thought learning opportunities, you had to be there in person. There's so much more available now that's virtual, and so much more of our business world, business connections are being done through formats like this. It's actually made us much more global than I think we have been before. But I think people don't have any idea how many different aspects there are to aviation, and there's a lot of jobs. And, when we even think of, many airports, of course, I look at Reno Tahoe International, and they're doing really well after the pandemic because there was such a return to leisure travel. Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, their airports are struggling a little bit more here on the East Coast, but that work didn't go away. Even if when your passenger numbers were down, the runways have to be, be maintained. The financials have to be done, all the same things. The square footage that you have to, in the terminal has to be cleaned or maintained. So many of those things did not change, even though a passenger number went down. But, passengers numbers are certainly back up, and particularly in leisure destinations across the US. So again, I think there's a whole lot of jobs out there.
Marilee, and I know we're wrapping up here, but I've known you for a few years, but every time we talk, I feel like I'm learning something new. And today was definitely one of those days. What you brought to us, it's incredible. I don't even know how to thank you, because you're sharing with us what's happening from the inside, and you even switched coasts to see what it was like over there.
And I gotta say, this is the scariest thing I've ever done. And sometimes you have to take it on and try it out. Nothing ventured. I still believe in nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Yeah, it's amazing. And your passion is obvious. There's a smile about you right now that I'm seeing that maybe I hadn't seen before. And so it's exciting to me. And as you mentioned, it's aviation just isn't for pilots. And some of us who have no experience can come into this industry and feel like we're leaders. And I'm one of those people. And I don't know a whole lot about aviation, but when I get to talk to people like you, I get to learn more. And I feel a little bit more comfortable in this space. So thank you for bringing that to me, but more importantly, thank you for bringing it to our candidates, because they're gaining from it. And your ability to answer some of these questions today is phenomenal, because you were throwing some fun questions. And so thank you for that.
Well, I mean, there's so many different aspects. You can make a long career of it. And I think, many times we look at if you're going to move up in aviation or in airports, you have to move airports. But I can tell you, working for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, which is so huge, I'm now around people that have had 35-year careers here and done so many different things. So I think there's a lot of mobility, a lot of upward mobility in airports. So go get them. It's a fun, it's just it's no day, every day is interesting. So it's a great career.
Well, perfect. I think we'll end it here, but Marilee, thank you very much for coming on today's show as our guest speaker. We all truly appreciate it.